how dare you push this? How dare you push this narrative that Trump is serious? I'm like, no, he's totally serious. It's offensive, and I think this is where the anti-American sentiment is coming from in Canada. I say this objectively, but with love. America is so uniquely ignorant. The Canada being annexed by America situation is a complicated place to be. I think the drumming up of blind patriotism by Canadians, or from Canadians, against this is a bit forced. I don't know many Canadians, and I didn't know many Canadians up until the past month, that have had a strong patriotic propensity for Canada, which I don't know if I do either, because I don't feel like a strong national identity. From Nova Scotia, I feel a strong like maritimer identity, but I guess it's like what I want to think about and what I want to kind of figure out for myself, right, is what are we conserving, what are we preserving by the obsession, this sudden nationalistic wave coming across the country. What is the nationalism in context to? Because Canada has always defined itself as not America, and that's sort of always been Canada's identity. Whatever America is doing, Canada is not, and you can trace this all the way back to the monarchy, right? When we wanted to stay a colony, is that, you know, Canada was going to stay royalist when America was going to revolt, right? It's like our identity from the get-go is based off of the antithesis of America, and it's sort of baked into our national identity, which I find really annoying, because at this point, what is America that Canada isn't? Like, what are we defining ourselves against? Because we're basically the same culture, we have the same pop culture, we speak the same language, we're not a monarch, we're not under the I guess we're still technically under the monarchy, but like not in any literal capacity. I guess free healthcare. It's like free healthcare and politeness, which we're not. I wouldn't call Canada polite. I'd call Canada's sort of scared. And this is coming from, I swear to God, this is not like a opinion I just came up with because I want to talk shit about Canada. I'm not very like pro annexation. I'm not I'm very like agnostic to the whole situation. But I've thought this forever, and ever since I started traveling and doing work in the US, Americans are more real. Canadians are polite, but that politeness comes from a fear. It's a fear of getting in other people's way. It's a fear of inserting yourself and overstepping your boundaries. Like America, I don't find America rude. I find America actually quite a bit more personable and honest face-to-face than I do Canada. Canada I find very cold, very like walled off, especially Toronto. Toronto's a very walled off and cold city. It's hard to talk to strangers here, and it's hard to get like a genuine reaction out of people. America I find is very like, although not as civil in like as far as just like niceties and basic manners, I find lack a lot in America. But the actual conversations I have with like grocery store cashiers or strangers in America are way more honest, to the point where I feel like on the defensive a little bit. Like I feel like oh, this person is being so outspoken to me, I feel like it's a bad situation. Right? In Canada, if someone approaches you and is extremely outspoken and personal with you, you automatically assume they're like a crackhead. In America, I don't get that as much. In America, it's like people are just like that all the time, and it's hard to adjust to. Last time I was in Los Angeles or like Miami, I found it very hard to like, even just dealing with like regular American colleagues, like content creators or people that like come by the studio that are American. I do see this huge difference in how they interface with people, how they talk, the amount to which like Americans will like bully you and poke fun at you in a way that's like civil. It's not mean. It's not mean-spirited. It's just many Americans' way of like getting to know people is like poking fun and like busting your balls, which Canada I'm not used to at all. Oh, that's good Toronto tap. God damn. Yeah, am I on the ball here? I feel like as an American, I am not agnostic on the topic. I think we are definitely overstepping with all this tall expansion, that we should just sit down and stop doing dumb stuff. As an American, I always found it kind of weird how a lot of Canadians dislike Quebec, even though it's the most distinct part of Canada. Yeah, fair enough. I think that's why we dislike Quebec. I mean, I think Canada has we're very left wing. I think we're very European in this sense, the way that most Europeans don't like nationalism in Europe, to my understanding, in Western Europe is kind of frowned upon. Like the idea of flying, I know in Germany, like anywhere in America, and like most places rural in Canada, you'll find Canadian and American flags flying. Like there's a sense of patriotism. Especially you go to Nova Scotia, you'll find provincial flags flying everywhere, right? Newfoundland, PEI, same thing. Like any house in Nova Scotia, in any neighborhood, you'll find a Nova Scotian flag flying outside. There's a strong sense of national identity. But in Germany, right, because like nationalism is sort of frowned upon, I've noticed this like playing GeoGuessr and shit too. Like you don't find, like it's not like some random house in a German suburb is just flying a German flag, because there's a bad history of nationalism in Western. Germans just fly the Israeli flag. Jesus Christ. Yeah, bad history of nationalism. So, Canada, in that sense, I think metropolitan Canadian areas don't like the idea of nationalism because we're very left-wing. We're very, very left-wing. And there's a lot to not like about Quebec. I think just from a political level, and the way Quebec kind of has like a privileged position in Canada and in Canadian politics, it's very, very, very frustrating. But yeah, they're nationalist. I think Canadians are just scared of nationalism. I think like most people from Toronto or Vancouver or like Winnipeg are just don't like nationalism. They're just scared of the idea of nationalism. And with Canada, there's not much to be nationalist to, right? We don't have a strong national identity. And this is where at my core, at my center, I find this push and pull of seeing this patriotic wave pop up in defiance of the American project of annexing Canada, or the tariffs, or whatever you want to call it, this sort of big expansionist push from America. And the nationalism is cool in its own right. I can't help but feel like sort of fuzzy when I hear the national anthem. Like I love patriotism. I think it's great. We're a secular society. Society needs to unite on some front. There needs to be some, just for the sake of coherence within the society you exist within, there needs to be some sort of unity between people, right? There needs to be some sort of collective glue that binds people together. Without that, if we're going to be a secular society, we're not going to have religion. We need some sort of collective pride to define ourselves by. And I think just having that pride is good enough. But yeah, when I see patriotic Canadians, I do not understand necessarily what we're being patriotic towards. If you can kind of catch my drift there. So anyway, we're gonna pop into. There's a great Canadian YouTube channel. I believe. I don't know if they are. Also, subscribe to the live channel. Our Chad Live. If you want to see some fucking stream clips, that's where all the stream clips go. Also, like the stream if you're here, for please, for the love of God.
What if America takes Quebec?
I don't think they want Quebec, man. Honestly, I feel like Trump would have more respect for Quebec than he would for the rest of Canada. If Trump seems to have some sort of respect for national pride, but it'd be I don't know. I'd be interested to see what America would do with a bunch of French speakers. Especially, I don't think the average American really understands how French Quebec is. Because if you go to Montreal, right, like you can get around with just English. That's totally fine. You can operate. You can go to a McDonald's or a coffee shop. And wait 1 second. Is it gonna read? No, it's not gonna read. I'll read that in a sec. Yeah, you can get around Montreal totally fine. Quebec City, quite a bit harder. Rural Quebec is difficult to get around and not speak French. I've had better luck in fucking Europe than I have had in Quebec getting around with just English. It's difficult. I really don't think most Americans understand. Like, Quebec is French. Like, it's literally entirely French. From Cashew Turtle, hard disagree. Canada had a strong national identity. The Trudeau administration has spent the last decade actively working to dismantle it. I still don't understand what... Like, national identity for its own sake is fine. But I don't understand yet what the national identity is. If it is just... Are we just talking, like, civilities and politeness? Canada's great. I mean, look, we are higher trust. I do believe Canada is a higher trust society than the U.S., just based on, like, just just day-to-day walking around, Canada's a very high-trust society in a way that I think Americans don't understand, in a way that I take for granted. I assume America has that high trust, and they really don't. Also, Hoser, what's up? Canada's unique case almost everywhere has some sort of regional alienation.
Half Quebec way on the American side, we can do it.
Do I have to pay for Adobe in order to edit your videos? I do have an editor already, so the editor application's closed for now. Please send me, if you're a dope editor, send me your stuff, and we'll go from there, but the editor application's currently closed. Yeah, no, I mean anywhere rural, dude, anywhere rural, you're gonna find people who are not as sympathetic to the project of Canada, and who are way more have a way stronger civic, like localist national, like a localist nationalism than they do have a federal, like countrywide nationalism. You see that in Newfoundland, Quebec, Nova Scotia, Nunavut, Northern Manitoba, Alberta, like in the same way. I think like Texans, correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm not like as familiar, I haven't like spent a lot of time in Texas or the South, but or like New York, right, is another great example. They have a strong civic identity, but it's in the context of America. Like they're Americans first, and then Texans second. And like Texas exists in the context. There's a bit of like a backlash, but Canada, it's not the same. Like people who are very people who are like very conservative, people from Alberta are way more like Albertan, rural, farmer, conservative first, and they don't place their identity in the broader context of Canada. And I think that's a huge difference. Same thing if you go out east. So I wanted to watch this video. I haven't watched this yet. The Urbanity. This is a great Canadian, I don't know what you'd call like a city planning channel, Canadian city planning channel. I've watched them for a long time. Very good people. I believe there's a few people in the studio that have talked to them. But yeah, cool channel. Check it out. And they had a interesting video here I wanted to pop up and watch.
I would consider it a privilege to be taken over by the United States of America. That's what everybody else in the world wants.
Normally, this channel focuses on housing and transportation policy, but over the past month or two, something very disturbing has been happening that's hard to ignore. Canada has had our biggest ally, neighbor, and friend, the United States, become increasingly hostile, threatening economic warfare with punishing tariffs that would kneecap our economy.
This is catastrophic. I mean, let's be very clear. There's no way of sugarcoating this. This is just completely bad news. There's no redeeming good news here for Canada.
To rub salt in the wound, the U.S. president has made suggestions, really threats, of Canada becoming the 51st state, saying that we're not—
He's dead serious about this, by the way. I think this— I would— This sounds like hate this guy's voice. Just relax for a second. Jesus fuck. Just listen to the man. Listen to the man speak. Yeah, he's dead serious about this. This is not a bit, and I'm not— I don't like the perspective of like, don't take this seriously. There was a Trudeau did a press conference where he said basically what I'm saying now, that Trump is very serious about this and like serious about this idea, and he got some backlash. They were like, how dare you push this? How dare you push this narrative that Trump is serious? I'm like, no, he's totally serious. Why would he not be serious? He pushes this so much. The best case scenario I can see from this, the best case scenario, I mean, not the best case scenario, but the 4D chess move I could see Trump playing is just getting people cognizant, or like trying to force the idea that Canada is really, really dependent on America, and that we should be like more well integrated with each other. But I do think like if Trump had an easy way to take Canada tomorrow, he would take it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
A viable country, and taunting the Prime Minister by calling him governor.
Then, as has become his practice, Trump spoke on just about anything, including again, without prompting, Canada, including again, a dig at the Prime Minister.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau.
Governor Trudeau, said Trump, reiterating his view Canada would be better off joining America, this time hinting maybe it needs to.
Canadians have responded by canceling trips to the U.S., booing the U.S. anthem, and the biggest outpouring of anti-American sentiment that I've seen in my lifetime.
They're just feeling a lot of betrayal, and really what they've shared with me is broken trust. They're deciding with their dollars where they're going, and it's anywhere.
And this is really where, like, it's offensive, and I think this is where the anti-American sentiment is coming from in Canada, is it does feel offensive to not be taken seriously, right? It feels offensive. It feels completely ridiculous to, as a country, be seen as like silly little weird people that are just like big goofballs up north. I think that's where a lot of the animosity from Canada towards the US is coming from. Because like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, like these are major players as far as like North American metropolitan areas go. Way bigger than most American cities. There's not like what city is beating Toronto for like GDP output? Probably like Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, right? Like Toronto is huge, and I think to just have our entire existence be summed up and be downplayed as like this weird satellite of America is annoying. On the other hand, I would love to see more integration between American and Canadian trade. I'd love to see an EU-style passport where like second-gen Canadian citizens can easily travel between Canada and the US. It's extremely frustrating to have to travel to the US and be treated like I don't know, like we're like the same people, you know? I live an hour from the American border. I grew up like 6 hours from the American border. It's really frustrating. And also, if you go back to the original tariffs he was going to implement, and the reasons why he was going to implement the tariffs, the reasons were ridiculous, and it was really frustrating. It was really frustrating to see like the immigration thing he brought up is total bullshit. There's a huge uptick in illegal immigration from Canada to the US. There's a huge uptick. But to say it's like a significant enough uptick to warrant massive economic downfall in the form of tariffs is absurd. If you're looking at 140,000 people a year, we could totally rein that in, and we should be reining it in. It's absurd we have not reined it in, but like it does not warrant tariffs. Say the fentanyl thing is the same thing. I believe it was like 2%. I have to fact check this, but it was like 2% of America's fentanyl was coming from the Canadian border. It's fucking outrageous. It's outrageous that we're gonna have that as the reason for to tariff goods and imports by 25%.
But the U.S. right now.
I've been following the U.S. coverage or lack thereof, and it's clear that a lot of Americans don't quite realize how much this has rattled us. So in this video, I want to explain the Canadian perspective. The suggestion of Canada becoming the 51st state reflects a basic lack of understanding of our country on multiple levels. First of all, Canada is a federation of provinces and territories in broadly the same way that the U.S. is a federation of states.
Oh yeah, this is hilarious too. The idea of the I haven't even fucking talked about this yet. The 51st state, as if we're going to be one state is insane. I mean, 50% of Canadians live below, with that chart you see all the time, 50% of Canadians live below this line. It's like most of them live in like Southern Ontario. Yeah, it's absurd to say 51st state as if America is itself like one giant state.
Provinces have their own identities and their own governments that handle big-ticket items like healthcare and education. Ontario's provincial budget is over $200 billion a year. Alberta and Quebec take different approaches to taxation and social services, just like California versus Texas. French-speaking Quebec in particular has a lot of independence and even has its own separate tax collection agency. Abolishing provinces to make Canada a state would be like abolishing states in the US. Talking about Canada becoming the 51st state is a dead giveaway that someone doesn't see Canada as a real place with its own internal political structure. If somehow Canada became a part of the US, we'd be up to 13 states. But the idea that Canadians are clamoring to join the US is just not true. If you know anything about Canada, you'd know that English Canadians don't like being confused for Americans, while French Canadians are protective of their language and sensitive about...
That's so true too. Going abroad, this is a very uniquely Canadian experience. Going abroad, most Canadians wear a Canadian flag somewhere on their body. Maybe less so now, but definitely like 8 years ago, you would wear a Canadian flag on you to inform where you were going that you weren't American because you would get treated better. Like it would be like, oh, you're not American? Okay, cool, whatever. And then they would like talk to you normally. Cuba, this is a totally different case. A totally different case because Americans can't go to Cuba. But most Canadians, especially like Toronto, Nova Scotia, like the east coast of Canada, will go to Cuba to vacation. And Americans can't go to Cuba to vacation. And like you always wear, if you're in Cuba, you wear a Canadian flag shirt or you wear a Canadian flag hat because Cubans fucking love Canadians. And Cubans love Canadians so much, they'll like, oh God, a Canadian. They'll like go out of their way to like treat you on the resorts and shit. They'll treat you so well. And we tip them like huge amounts. I was on vacation with my aunt and my mom one time, like 5 years ago in Cuba. And we had tipped this guy so much money that he like came up to us when we were leaving. And he was like, you guys have like literally changed my life for the next 6 months. I can't express like how life-changing the amount of money I've received from you guys is. And we're talking like probably over the course of the trip between the three of us had given him like $200. So yeah, no, Canadian, yeah, we're used to being like the world just treats Canada better when you're abroad. If you go anywhere else, they're just like, fuck, people fucking love Canadians.
About being a minority in an ocean of English. Neither is predisposed to joining the US. It's nothing personal. Most Canadians visit the US often and have friends, family, and fond memories there. But we don't consider ourselves the same or want to merge politically. And we have the same sensitivities that a lot of smaller countries have to being absorbed politically or culturally by a larger neighbor. Americans visiting Toronto or Vancouver might not find that Canada feels all that foreign and isn't as different as going to another continent, but there are more differences under the hood than you might realize. We have a different system and tradition of government that's generally more stable and less dysfunctional. Problems like gerrymandering and government shutdowns don't exist here. Crime, in particular violent crime, isn't as big of a problem. Toronto is 1/10 the murder rate of Chicago. Guns exist, but we have stricter laws and a more responsible gun culture focused more on hunting, sport, and rural uses.
It is baffling that, like, Chicago and Toronto are the same size. I feel like that's maybe a misconception from Americans on, like, the size of Canadian cities. But yeah, Toronto is bigger than, like, the Greater Toronto area is bigger than Chicago. And to have, two cities the same size, nearly, and be located in the same part of the world. Like Chicago's an 8-hour drive away from Toronto. And have a 10th of the gun violence is fucking insane. Like, I never feel unsafe here. I never ever feel unsafe in Toronto. I never have. There's crackheads, and like I'm a big dude. I can deal with that. But it's a very, very safe place. Very, very safe.
Our education culture is more egalitarian, with more consistency in public schools and less status differentiation based on where you went to university. We have different norms around the role of religion in politics. We have stronger social programs. We had a baby recently, and the experience was vastly different than it would be in the US, with free hospital care, a year of paid maternity leave, and, for the future, subsidized daycare here in Quebec. Canada is not perfect. I wish our economy was more diversified. Getting a regular family doctor is difficult in many places. We have an awful housing crisis. I wish we had faster trains. I don't love our first-past-the-post voting system. But there are meaningful reasons to be attached to our country and its existence as an independent entity separate from the United States. And more fundamentally, it's up to us. New Zealand has the right to be a separate country from Australia, even if they have a lot of similarities. Belgium, Switzerland, and Austria can exist even if they share languages with larger neighbors. Before this ordeal in more normal times, you could have potentially gotten support from Canadians for an agreement on freer movement between the two countries. But the idea of merging with the US would have been fringe and far-fetched. Now that it's an outside threat backed by bullying language and policy, it's scary and insulting, and Canadians are recoiling from the US rather than feeling invited closer. This American news host is confused and even offended that Canada doesn't want to join the US.
Because if I were a citizen of another country and I was a neighbor of the United States, I would consider it a privilege to be taken over by the United States of America. That's what everybody else in the world wants. American citizenship.
I don't understand. America is so uniquely, and I say this with love. I say this objectively, but with love. America is so uniquely ignorant to the rest of the world in a way that it's like baffling. On just how few Americans understand like even where places are. Like where countries are, like where China is, like where countries are located. And there's a lot of issues here. Taxation is a big one for me. The taxation is so fucking high, and I don't feel like I get a lot in return. But then I've been ignorant to how good I think America is. And then I go to America, and I realize there's like places you can't go at nighttime. Like that's a foreign concept to me, is like being in the wrong place at the wrong time is like a non-existent issue here. The idea of like we have ERs that are free. If I break my arm right now, I can walk into a hospital and be treated and leave without paying a dime. It's going to take like 12 hours, but I can do it. If I walk in there bleeding, if I walk in there thinking I'm having a heart attack, same thing. There's like absolutely no risk to just going to the hospital. So there's certain benefits that like I just don't think about, but like we really do have them. And I'm unsure about like if Canada had like lower taxes and we didn't have a housing crisis, I wouldn't want to be American. Like there's only two things. The housing crisis is a big one for me. If we didn't have that, I wouldn't want to be American. If I'm not talking about like zero taxes, I'm not talking like a Florida or like a Texas situation here. Just like marginally less taxes and a bit less immigration and a solution to the housing crisis. There's no way I'd stay. I'd never want to leave. I'd go back to Nova Scotia. Like this isn't a common perspective. This idea that like every Canadian, maybe right now, yes, because our economy sucks. 10 years ago, fuck no. 10 years ago, most Canadians would not leave to be Americans. They would not want to give up their Canadian citizenship to be American. There's just no way. And hopefully we can get things on a path to solve the housing crisis, or at least like mitigate its like exponential rise, which is kind of happening right now. Hopefully freer trade between the two countries and a way for Canadians to easily travel and do work in major financial centers in the US and come back. Some sort of better integration is like completely necessary. We share one border, right? We share one border with each other. We should be there at this point, but this idea of like every Canadian wants to be American is just a complete fucking lie.
For some reason, that's repellent to you Canadians. And I find that...
Wait, was it? Hoser. Last time I was in the US, I had an Airbnb in the hood, and it was wild to actually have a dangerous area near a major city. Yeah, I know, right? I know, it's insane. That's just completely foreign to Canadians.
Personally offensive, Premier.
Setting aside the stunning disrespect for a premier leading a province larger than all but 4 states, I have to wonder if this mindset of American exceptionalism partly stems from how the US-Mexico border and illegal immigration are so central to American politics, especially on Fox, creating the illusion that the whole world is desperate to be American. I'm sure that's not true even for the developing world, but it's definitely not true for the rest of the developed world. Also, if you're looking for more states, you don't even have to look beyond your borders. There are already places like DC and Puerto Rico that lack statehood. Those are US citizens without full voting rights. It doesn't send a good signal for how you would treat a conquered Canada. Many dismiss all this talk of the 51st state as just bluster or joking from a president known for hyperbole. He's not going to invade you. Well, he clearly has territorial expansion on his mind. Just ask our friends in Panama and Denmark.
Greenland have been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, f*** off.
No, I don't think a US invasion of Canada is especially likely, But when the probability shifts from 0 to even 5%, that's still honestly pretty chilling. The most concrete threat isn't an invasion, though, it's steep tariffs, taxes on American companies importing things from Canada, to cripple our economy. We're a small country beside a big country, and our economy relies a lot on trading with the US. He's threatened across-the-board tariffs on all imports from Canada and Mexico, as well as targeted higher tariffs on key Canadian industries like aluminum and automotive.
It's shift change at this Windsor assembly plant, the city's largest employer, and workers like Jonathan Klein are on edge.
I got 2 little kids to worry about, so I definitely didn't sleep very well last night hearing about this news.
But you know what? The betrayal from Americans, it's horrible.
It's devastating.
I think too, a lot of the animosity here from Canada to the U.S. isn't. What's frustrating personally is I'm not going to blame Trump. I'm not going to blame America for Trump. I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to say without evidence that because Trump said something, I think that America backs him or believes in him. But that seems to be the case. Is the amount of Americans, the amount of fucking stupid, the amount of conservative Americans who are just who are so gung ho to back everything that Trump says and does, and including especially the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, without having any knowledge of the issue, just blindly following what Trump does. I think I underestimated Americans and their how much they would just blindly follow their leader. Because it seems like lunacy to me. Okay, for example, no one fucking likes Trudeau. No one in Canada likes Trudeau. We all want him gone. No one people liked Stephen Harper, but not that many people. There's always been I haven't been alive. I have never experienced strong nationalist or patriotic support for our country's leader in my lifetime. I could see that change, maybe with Pierre Poilievre. People seem to really like him. He's the opposition leader of the Conservative Party. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's frustrating too to see Americans who are so willing to, all of a sudden, having never thought of Canada their entire lives or never having strong opinions on Canada, just because Trump now says something. The amount of Americans that are just all of a sudden being like, "Oh yeah, fuck Canada, 51st state," making fun of it. I'm like, that's frustrating too. I think why can't we just I think it take a more nuanced perspective to this, you know?
It'll devastate us, and it'll impact quickly.
The Financial Post called it an economic earthquake with the potential to obliterate jobs, cripple industries, and leave millions of Canadians financially stranded. The sheer scale of likely job losses is staggering. Imagine that your biggest ally and trading partner decides to threaten your economy with a deep recession on a whim. With friends like this, who needs enemies? Calm down, it's just a tactic to get a good deal with Canada, some people say online. Well, we had a deal. It was called the USMCA, and it was the best and most important trade deal ever made by the USA.
Give my highest regards to Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. I'll tell you, it's turned out to be a very, very good deal for both, and a very, very good deal for all three. We have big deficits with Canada, like we do with all countries. I mean, I look at some of the deals made, I say, who the hell made these deals that are so bad?
What about the...
Fuck me, man. Well, I'll go into this afterwards. The $200 million trade deficit that Trump has talked about too as a reason for the tariffs is total bullshit. And we'll look into that after this video is done.
Other complaints with Canada. The U.S. does have a trade deficit. Americans buy more from Canada than vice versa, but it's modest and mostly due to energy.
Oh, wait. That's one of the charts I was going to pull up. Yeah. So, yeah, here's the trade deficit. Canada's the 10th largest trade deficit compared to Taiwan, Japan, Korea, Italy, India, Germany, Mexico, and China. And also, the trade deficit has increased rapidly in the past 4 years. The reason it's increased so fast is because America bounced back from COVID faster than anyone ever projected they would. So it's not an increasing Canada fucking America over. It's because of America's economy bounced back faster than anyone projected.
Americans buy more from Canada than vice versa, but it's modest and mostly due to energy. It turns out that Americans buy a lot of oil and gas, which is not a subsidy to Canada. Canada is not a large source of fentanyl either. You can go on the U.S. Customs and Border Protection website to see that they seized about 22,000 pounds of fentanyl last year, and only 43 pounds, 0.2% of the total, were associated with the Canadian border. Meanwhile, the U.S. is the major source of illegal guns and drugs into Canada, but they don't seem to take responsibility for this in the way that they hold Mexico and Canada responsible.
Police in the city seized over 352 handguns, the majority smuggled from the U.S.
Vastly more amount of drugs coming to Canada from the U.S. than vice versa.
It is true that Canada doesn't spend enough on defense. We spend 1.4% of our GDP below the NATO target of 2% that we agreed to. But fixing this wouldn't be a payment to the US that would be spending more money to build up our military and capabilities. After this ordeal, there's a pretty good chance that we will reach the target, except that it might be to protect us from you. Many Americans will say, well, I didn't vote for this. Most of these threats didn't materialize until after the election, so I'm not sure anyone really voted for this. But what's really strange is how many people jumped in to defend and justify it after the fact. Twitter suddenly became a place where everyone hates Canada?
Canada isn't a country, it's a crime syndicate disguised as a neoliberal cult. And a very large proportion of its citizens have Stockholm Syndrome. That's fucking retarded, dude. Oh, how do you come up with shit like that? Jesus Christ.
Hating Canada became the current thing. When Canada announced her own counter tariffs, the governor of Texas, among many others, basically responded with, "How dare you defend yourself?" People who would be the first to describe themselves as patriotic Americans won't tolerate patriotism or even basic self-respect from citizens of other countries? That's not a relationship or even a negotiation based on reason, shared values, long-term thinking, or reciprocity. It's a blatant power play and desire for domination. It's clear that some American conservatives have polarized themselves into hating Canada because of Justin Trudeau, seemingly unaware that he was resigning and that his Liberal Party, after a decade in power, was set to be trounced by the Conservative Party this year. In the past month, the race has gotten much tighter. The only thing giving the Liberals a fighting chance is the opportunity to stand up to US bullying and belittling, which is jet fuel for Canadian patriotism.
Numerous polls had the Conservatives with a 20-plus point lead over the Liberals at the start of 2025. Now, it's single digits, thanks to U.S. President Donald Trump's consistent threats against Canada.
I wanted to make this video because I've seen a lot of American coverage that doesn't really capture the gravity of the situation for us.
Concern tonight over U.S. tourism as the thought of Canada becoming the 51st state and those potential tariffs have caused some Canadians to cancel their trip to the U.S.
The thought of becoming the 51st state? Statehood isn't some idea nebulously under consideration somewhere. It's a repeated taunt and/or threat on the part of your government against our country, backed up by threats of economic warfare despite repeated repudiations by all levels of government and all major parties.
Trump saves Trudeau's political career. No, Trudeau's already, Trudeau's out. He's done. He resigned. He's not running again. There's no world in which we continue to have Justin Trudeau. There's on the Liberal Party, there's Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, who seem to be the most likely candidates to run the Liberal Party. I believe those elections are in March for the Liberal Party candidacy. And then Pierre Poilievre. But the issue, right, so Pierre Poilievre, the Canadian Conservative leader, he's not people see him, like non-conservative Canadians see Poilievre as Canada's Trump. And Poilievre has never given this idea credence. And he's already been grossly outspoken against the idea of the tariffs or of Canada being a 51st state or anything that Trump has said. He seems very anti-Trump right now. So I don't understand the narrative that Poilievre is somehow the pro-Trump option, because there's no evidence to really back that up. I don't know much about Mark Carney, to be honest. Something I should look into. But it's weird to see the Liberal Party swing back so fast because they were so low. It seemed like it was good. It seemed like they were like in a death spiral like fucking 4 months ago.
Conversations around a 51st state are a non-starter. It's never going to happen.
We will bear any burden and pay any price to protect the sovereignty and independence of our country.
I find it reprehensible, inexplicable, profoundly disappointing.
Make no mistake, Canadians will stand strong, will stand proud, and will stand up to any threat.
Americans have a lot going on, and I don't expect Canada to be your only focus. I just ask that you understand one thing. This is not a joke for us. This is a big deal. When the tariffs were officially announced, our public broadcaster covered it live for 17 hours straight. The threats and taunts strike at the core of Canadian identity in both English and French Canada. If you hear booing during your anthem, don't take it personally. We know we have friends in the US, but your government's hostility towards our sovereignty, economy, and dignity is unprecedented and deeply unsettling. I'm making this video in February 2025, and the future is uncertain. Maybe they'll sign a deal next month and make it all go away after burning through a lot of trust and goodwill. Or maybe we're in for 4 more years of threats and punishment, in which case I see Canada fundamentally reorienting itself and shifting away from the US in ways that I can't really predict but would have been unthinkable not very long ago.
That sucks too, because I don't understand, like, the world where Canada and the US aren't close allies doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, if the US is going to go isolationist, which it seems like that's the path they're heading down, and then Canada is also going to isolate from the US and then keep, like, stay globalized with the rest of the world, that just seems like a worst case scenario to me, where we have no relationship with our southern border. That's horrible. I don't know. I don't know what the way out of this is right now, but it's dumb. Have a good night, Trash Satchel.
Next week, there's a key deadline for your Canada and Mexico tariffs. I believe those countries have done enough on the border to stop those from taking effect. And for President Macron, I'm wondering if you believe that this critical minerals deal with Ukraine represents a de facto security guarantee by the United States, since the U.S. would have an interest in protecting those reserves in Ukraine. Thank you.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. What does he mean by the mistreated? Yeah, I don't know what he means by every reason he's given about being mistreated doesn't make any sense. Like we've said, the fentanyl thing, the immigration thing, the trade deficit. I don't understand. I don't understand what he means at all.
We've been taken advantage of. We were led by, in some cases, fools, because anybody that would sign documents like they signed, where they were able to take advantage of the American people, like has happened over the last long period of time, except for a little 4-year period that took place 4 years ago. But anybody that would agree to allow this to happen to our country should be ashamed of themselves. No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything, every aspect that you could imagine they took advantage of. I look at some of these.
I don't even know why I'm fucking listening to this. Jesus Christ. I don't even know why I'm listening to. It's unintelligible. It's like completely incomprehensible. Jesus Christ. In the first 3 quarters of 2024, roughly 800 billion or 600 billion of goods crossed the Canada-US border, including a trade and services boosts. These totals to 683 billion American. That's the equivalent of 63 billion in total import and export flows each and every day. Only Mexico edges out Canada. When it comes to which country dominates in buying American products, Canada is the single largest market by a large margin, of nearly 350 billion goods and services crossing Canada's border over the first 3 quarters of 2024. Some 34 U.S. states sell more goods to Canada than any other foreign economy. Trade between the U.S. and Canada is highly integrated. Most Canadian exports are imports used by American businesses in their own production, more so than with other trading partners. Thus, a disproportionate share of the negative tariff impacts on imports from Canada will be through the channel of business supply chains and productivity that would drive higher costs and inflationary pressures at a retail level. From the American lens, trade with Canada is balanced. Based on Statistics Canada data, Canada's merchandise trade surplus to the U.S. last year was on track to reach $100 billion. That equates to 2.3% of Canadian GDP. The U.S., however, enjoys an edge in service trades, mainly related to Canadians flowing over the American border. The impact shrinks the trade surplus to $85 billion, or 2.8% of Canadian GDP. Looking at the trade situation in the U.S. lens yields smaller figures, partly reflecting different data measurement. Applying Census Bureau figures, the U.S. is on track to a record trade deficit with Canada of roughly $45 billion in 2024, or a mere 0.2% of U.S. GDP. In Canadian dollars, at spot rate, that would amount to $65 billion. Since Trump 1.0, the U.S. trade position eroded against Canada. The U.S. trade deficit with Canada has deteriorated since Trump's first mandate, a fact that is probably not lost on the president as he presses on using tariffs as a primary international policy tool. Between 2016 and 2020, the U.S. posted a modest annual average surplus with Canada of around $20 billion. Some of the weakening of the U.S. position with Canada reflects the outperformance of the U.S. economy since the pandemic, as well as a material increase in Canadian energy exports southward. Despite this loss of ground, the U.S. trade shortfall with Canada remains below its record of almost $75 billion in 2005. Yeah, because he keeps saying $200 billion. And I don't understand where the $200 billion number is coming from. Because it's just like, I've never seen that number. Any of the research I've done into this, like $200 billion, that number doesn't exist. He just came up with that. U.S. trade deficit with Canada is the second lowest among trading partners. Chart 5 shows where Canada stacks up against other major countries. It's down there. The $45 billion U.S. shortfall with Canada in 2024 places as the second smallest behind only France, the amount that amounts to a mere 4% of overall U.S. trade deficit. So in essence, reducing imports from Canada would barely move the needle. The U.S. trade deficit with Canada was 1/8 the size of China's and 1/5 that of Mexico. Yeah, so there's the chart we were talking about earlier. There's the second smallest trade deficit, second only to France, and behind Italy, India. Behind Italy. Think about that. Canada's trade deficit with the U.S. is smaller than Italy's. This is why I think he's more serious, unless he's actually fucking retarded and like completely losing his mind and mentally deteriorating, which is a high possibility. I don't see why he wouldn't be serious with the 51st state thing, because everything he said about Canada and the reason he's given for the 25% tariffs seems to be a complete lie, which leads me to believe that he is more interested in whittling down the relationship between Canada and the U.S. to fingering us before he can fuck us, and I don't know. I don't know what no one knows, right? What the actual taking or the becoming of the 51st state would look like. I do know that personally, I'm not dying in a war fighting fucking Americans, and I don't think many Canadians are that interested in that either. Which I guess reflects our nationalism, or just how strong our patriotism is. Because, again, this is why I'm not agnostic. I'd prefer to stay Canada. But I'm not going to, I'm not protesting this. I'm not dying in the streets or dying in a war or putting my life on the line or losing anything over this prospect. I think at the end of the day, it would just suck. It would be inconvenient and weird. And it's completely unnecessary. And it just speaks to a fucking oligarchic madman who has taken power over our southern border. But I don't know. Maybe some other Canadians disagree with that. But yeah, I don't know anybody who is willing to put their life on the line for what this would look like. And I feel like it wouldn't look like an invasion. That would be. I don't know. I'm just imagining. I've thought about this, what this would look like when he was talking about this initially, right? Of just walking out the street one day and seeing American tanks roll down roll down fucking Yonge Street in Toronto. I'm like, hello, yoo-hoo, hello, oh, welcome to Canada. You know, it's fucked up, man. It's insane. It's truly insane. Energy accounts for all of the U.S. trade deficit with Canada. Knew that. It's unclear where Trump or his team derived the $200 billion number. In a recent press conference, he referred to it while discussing America's massive trade deficit with Canada, yet it's roughly 4 to 5 times the official reported statistics. In any event, a trade deficit is not a subsidy that would ring true if, for example, the U.S. government transferred $45 billion annually to Canadian companies out of goodwill. But Americans are receiving value for the dollars spent in the form of goods and services. The trade deficit the U.S. runs with Canada reflects their economic outperformance and above-average spending of Americans. That's driving hunger for energy products. Moreover, the greenback's reserve currency status also creates a massive demand for U.S. financial assets, which in turn allows the U.S. to finance its global consumption at a lower cost. It could very well be that President Trump is also factoring in other costs the U.S. incurs. For example, the spending required to bring Canada's defense spending to 3% of GDP as per Trump's amounts to around $45 billion. But taking into consideration both the deficit and Canada's military spending shortfalls still leads to a sizable gap vis-a-vis the $200 billion estimate. On the other side of the ledger, often overlooked, are the benefits to the U.S. from Canada's status as a reliable supplier of energy and other goods that are used for both domestic and consumption and profitable investment opportunities. Some of the data points in this report may come as a surprise to readers. The bulk of the U.S. trade deficit with Canada is owing to energy. Outside of that, the scales tip into America's favor. Even with this data, it's proven insufficient to fend off trade attacks that will extend well beyond the current bout. In mid-2026, the USMCA comes to under review, regardless of the deals that will eventually be struck between the countries. The lesson that should be learned in Canada is that there could be no guarantee against future tariff attacks. Has Trump renamed Canada as the U.S. 51st state, as Trump said? Did Trump say this? What the fuck? Oh my god, man. A controversy has erupted in Canada after Google Maps user noticed that several provincial parks in British Columbia are being labeled as state parks. According to the Global News, multiple users reported that these changes appeared recently. In Alberta, several provincial parks are also labeled as state parks, including Miquelon Lake Provincial Park and Lois Hole Sentinel Provincial Park near Edmonton. Google responds to label confusion. However, Google Canada denied making any recent changes, stating that state park has long been a default label in its system. We have not made any recent changes in the way we label parks in Canada. The vast majority of these parks have had their existing labels for several years. We're actively working to update labels in parks in Canada to avoid confusion. Okay. It's still a nothing sandwich, you know? It's still a nothing sandwich. It's just the number of people that go bankrupt every year for medical bills. Canada, 0. Australia, 0. France, 0. United States, 326,000.
Inside on, Saskatchewan would follow, and then you go west to British Columbia. There is a movement in Canada to join us. I want to get your thoughts on that and how that's proceeding right now.
So it's true. Thank you, Brian. It's true. A lot of people in Canada are liking becoming our beautiful, cherished 51st state. They'll have to pay much lower taxes. They'll have the ultimate security. You know, they don't pay very much for security right now because they rely on us, which is really unfair to us. They make cars that we could make, and they send them back into the United States. They make a lot of things, including the sending of oil and everything. We don't need their oil. We don't need their lumber. In fact, we're going to be freeing up, and I've asked...
That's true. America does run America net exports oil. They could do that. He's right there.
Howard Lutnick to get that done with Lee and everybody, Lee Zeldin, environmental. We're freeing up our forests. We're going to be able to...
Yeah, no, it's really funny that the amount of just misinformation that Trump pushes of the idea that most Canadians want. Is this Montreal? That's definitely Montreal. Of course, that's so fucking Montreal. So I'm running a fucking unicycle. That's so fucking Montreal. Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, it's not a thing that people want. I can objectively say that it's objectively. I mean, it's like he lied about Zelensky's approval rating being 4% when it's actually about 50. I thought that was just the Canadian nationalism leaving your body. No. Would Canada joining the America be accelerationist or the opposite? Can you turn your beautiful voice up? Is it a little low? Sorry, it's because my head was turned. I gotta talk close to the mic here. Dude, Montreal is so goofy. I've noticed this every single Montrealer I meet, just so burpy and farty. Did I do this bit on the stream already? I don't know. Every Montrealer I meet just fucking give me a fuck. Every Montrealer sounds like that. Montreal is either like disgusting, tiny, like picture like Danny DeVito. Like Montreal is either that or like the most attractive, slender, like 6'4" men in trench coats you've ever seen. That's like every guy in Montreal. Also beautiful, beautiful women. Montreal. It's a hot city. Montreal's a hot city. Never thought I'd die side by side with the Quebecois. Yeah. Hey, fair enough, man. That's about all I have to like. We're so up in the air with the 51st state stuff right now. And even with the tariffs, when the tariffs come online, I'll do a stream, and we can talk more about the potential fallout of the tariffs. That's about all I have to say about Canada being the 51st state right now.